I think I met most of you this morning, but if I didn't, my name is Mike Goff. My wife Dawn. We're glad to be here visiting with you from Colorado. And if I get aggravated with this, I'll try not to throw it or anything. I don't know. I might cling to it, and I might trip over it. So we'll see. I did mention that I've worked with doing services in a nursing home, so if you fall asleep, I won't be too offended. I'm a little used to that. If you stand up and go, "What'd you say, Pastor?" then I'll try to get a little louder for you. And I also work with children, so if you get up and use the restroom, I won't be offended. If you lay on the floor in color, that's okay, as long as I can tell you're listening. And, I work with teens, so if you leave and don't come back, I will come look for you. So, that's all just to say, relax. We're here to hear a word from God and to be the family of God. And it's not about me, it's not about you, it's about Him. So we're all going to try to focus on that. There have been a lot of studies about birth order in our culture. Not just in our culture, but around the world. And it seems to be that where you're born in the family has a little bit of shape on your personality. You might say your home life screwed you up forever. Or you might say those early foundations shape who you are. If you're an oldest child, who's an oldest child here? Okay, so and thank you, Ruth, because I was going to get you if you didn't say yes. I picked on her all week, so I'm also an oldest child, so I told her it takes one to know one. So the oldest child is the responsible child, it's the firstborn, the pressure's on them, they're the leader, they're also very bossy. My mother is a firstborn child, so I know that firsthand. They want everybody else to know they were there first, and this is how you do it, and if you step out of line, they'll help you get back in. Who's a middle child here? Middle child. Okay. My wife is a middle child. They're always slighted. They're always forgotten. Nobody cares about them. They're not as old as the big kid, and they're not the baby. They're just kind of lost in the middle. Our son Tyler is the invisible child. And he just, they're the peacemakers in the family. They want everybody to get along. And occasionally they have to do something really shenanigan-like to get attention, because the baby gets the attention. The oldest kid is, bossing everybody around, and they just kind of get lost in the shuffle. So, those are people pleasers in the group. If we start to have an argument in our house, Tyler will do anything to interrupt the argument, to make peace. He'll tell a joke, he'll walk between the people, he'll just, he's just the triangulator. He'll stand up and do something funny just so you'll forget that you're mad at somebody else. And I expect your middle children are like that. Who's the youngest in the family? Okay, the baby of the family. The preferred place to be in life is mama's baby. I'm just going to tell you that's where it is. My kids will tell you that's where it is. My youngest will tell you that's where it is. My wife says that's not true. She does not treat him any differently than the others, and we believe her. Judge for yourself. Good. Only children here. Only children. You kind of get a mix of all of it. You get the leader abilities because you're around adults your whole life, and there aren't. Everybody's older than you and more competent than you. So you feel kind of inadequate, and you have to prove yourself. But you also get to be spoiled like the baby because you're the only one. So the only children tend to be the all-about-me people. They just stand still while the rest of us revolve around them. And some people who are oldest children, like my daughter, never get over that fact. Whenever our boys both spend the night and it's just Dawn and Haley and myself, Haley goes, "My perfect family." Because she really enjoys being the center of attention. So where we come into the world and who we grow up with, that kind of shapes how we are. Our passage today is not going to be a story that you've never heard before, I expect. We're going to talk about the prodigal son. We're going to be in Luke chapter 15, verse 11 through 32. I can't tell you a set way that I always do things, because if I figure out I'm doing things the same, I change. I'm just a confused I get bored, and I don't want you to get bored with me. So I also don't want to fail consistently. You know, if I'm going to mess up, I at least want to mess up in a different way than I did last week. So my preaching style is eclectic, like my music style. It's whatever suits me to that day, whatever God gives me that day. And some days, He gives it to me that day. So this one He gave me Tuesday this week. I was going in a little bit different direction, but this is where God started to work with me. In Luke chapter 15, the point of this passage is about the value of lost people. The value of lost people to God. We get this lovely story of a father and two sons. And I'll kind of work through it a little bit, but where that falls in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is teaching the disciples about the kingdom. He's teaching them about how God, as our Heavenly Father, acts, how people are valued. At the beginning of the chapter, He values things differently for the Heavenly Father than the Pharisees would value. He talks about spending time with sinners and tax collectors. He uses a parable of a lost sheep. And he talks about a shepherd that might have a flock of 100, and if one sheep were to go off, he would leave the 99 that are safe and seek after the one. He talks about a lost coin. If you only had a few small coins in a little cottage like you would have had in first century Palestine, and you lost one of them, you turn the place upside down. You sweep all the dirt floor because you have to find it. It's that important. And he uses those to show us how God the Heavenly Father values His children. When we get to chapter 15, verse 11, what I will probably do today is just give you a little bit at a time and then talk about the verses. It's a little lengthy passage. I really prefer to read the passage and then teach about it. 20 verses is kind of long to listen to stretch, so I'll do a few at a time. So Jesus continued, "There was a man who had two sons. And the younger one said to the father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them." Now what you have to see here is, this is not Jewish custom. This is all completely against the way they would have done things. The younger son, he's unmarried, so he's probably a late teenager. He only gets half what the older son gets, because in Jewish custom, the firstborn male gets a double portion as his fourth birthright. So the younger son at this point is basically saying, "Father, I wish you were dead. Just give me what's coming to me and let me run my own life." That really is the cultural equivalent of what he's saying. He's not bashing his father, but he's resisting the influence of his father. He's saying, "I want what's mine, and I want it right now." Completely against Jewish custom. Jewish custom was to not pass out the inheritance early, to wait almost to the point of death. So not long after that, the younger son got together all he had. He set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. Wild living is, he went on a party trip. He just went to do what felt good. He went where he wanted, he ate what he wanted, he spent his time with who he wanted. If it felt good, he did it. It's a lot like our culture today. It was all about pleasure seeking, it was all about the self, the me. This is where he was. And like so many people that follow down that path, it wasn't long before he was busted. Just flat broke and destitute and wishing for anything better than where he was. A lot of times when God gives us our way, it's not a kind thing, because His way is good for us. Our way, not so much all the time. Now, in my life, I've had the opportunity to feel like the good son, feel like the prodigal son, and now I'm learning to be like the father and try to love my children the same way. And I like the way that this passage shifts a little bit depending on the perspective you take and where you are in your life. So we'll touch back on that, but as we follow through, think about the different characters and how they feel for each other. So after he'd spent everything, so he's already broke, there was a famine in the whole country and he began to be in need. This is not a mild recession like we have, where you have to cut down to just cut out the pay channels and have satellite. And, you have to have a regular cell phone and not a smartphone. This is destitute starvation. A famine in the world at that time, that part of the world, it was a difference in life and death. Most of us in our culture, I once heard a person say from another country, they said, I dream of going to America where even the poor people are fat. That's our culture. We are a blessed culture. We're a wealthy culture. We're the wealthiest country that's ever lived. So it's a little hard for us to relate to losing everything and then famine hitting. It does happen in our world. There are people, even in America, who don't know where their next meal is coming from. But for us most of us to wrap our minds around that, it's a bit of a stretch. So he's there and he's hungry, and he went out and he hired himself to a citizen of that country, because he's in a foreign land. This is a Gentile. This is not another Jewish believer, which by itself would have been an insult to a Jewish boy. And then he had to go a step further. He went out to feed the pigs. Now, the pigs are unclean animals for Jewish people. They're not allowed to eat them. They're not allowed to touch them. They're not allowed to be inside the community. Pigs had to graze outside because God said they're unclean. For a Jewish boy to have to go and work with the pigs, that's about as low as it gets. I don't know where your working with the pigs is. I don't know if it's flinging French fries at McDonald's or rubbing fenders at the car wash or stacking boxes for a freight company. For me, junk batteries was pretty really fun. A bunch of old leaking car batteries stacking up. It wasn't pig slop, but it wasn't glamorous by any stretch of the imagination. You fill in what the thing is for you. But think of the worst job that you would have to take just to be able to eat. So he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one would give him anything. He was so hungry, he wanted to eat just the leftover scraps that the pigs would have. Pods off a tree. Think of beans or peas that come in a pod. That's what these pigs were eating. So at that point, as usually happens when God gives us our way, or our Father says, okay, go your way, we come to the end of our road, and eventually, hopefully, we come to the end of our senses, and we say, okay, my way wasn't very good. I'm ready to give in. When he came to his senses, he said to himself, how many of my father's hired hands, they have food to spare, and here I have nothing. I'm starving to death. So he began to make up a plan. The wheels are spinning. When we get in trouble, the first thing we think, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to scheme to get back into good graces? I know I left on bad terms, but certainly there's got to be a way to work my way back. And so he starts to think to himself, he says, I know what I'll do. I'll go back and I'll say to my dad, Father, I've sinned against you. I've sinned against heaven. I'm not even worthy to be your son anymore. I don't want to be your son. Just make me one of your hired. Just make me a servant. So he got up and he went to his father. Then the next verse says, but while he was still a long way off, think of a country gentleman working out in the fields, open fields, flat land like we have in this area, not where you can't see down the block without a hill. He can see a long way out, and he sees his son. And when he sees his son, he has compassion for him. He feels for his hurt. And he runs to meet his son. Another direct violation of Jewish culture. No good, any commentary that you look in will tell you, no good Jewish father, no good Middle Eastern father would have ran on purpose without being in battle or fleeing for his life. He certainly wouldn't have gone to meet his son. It would have been up to the son to approach him and make amends. And in this situation, even more so, because the son had basically said, I wish you were dead, I'm out of here. But this father loves his son, and he just breaks out in a run. The translation for threw his arms around him and kissed him literally hung off his shoulders. The father ran and just fell against his boy. And just really kissed him and said, I'm so glad you're home, son. And the son began his speech. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer to be worthy to be called your son. But the father interrupts him. He doesn't even hear the apology. The father says to his other servants, stop what you're doing. I need the fattened calf. I need the choice meat, the filet mignon. We're having a feast tonight.